There was once a merchant who lived in a bustling town at the edge of a vast desert. His name was not important, for he was like many others, driven by ambition, burdened by worry, and endlessly chasing after the next sale, the next profit, the next moment of satisfaction. He was successful, at least by the standards of the world. His shop was filled with rare silks, spices from distant lands, and trinkets that glittered like the stars. Yet, no matter how much he acquired, there was always something missing, a hollow space within him that no amount of gold could fill. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, the merchant sat alone in his shop, counting his coins. The streets outside were quiet, the town settling into its nightly rhythm. But inside, his mind was anything but still. He thought of the caravan he had sent across the desert weeks ago, carrying his most precious goods. It was late, and he had heard no word of its fate. His thoughts spiraled. What if the caravan had been lost? What if his wealth was slipping through his fingers like sand? What if, after all his striving, he was left with nothing? As he sat there, consumed by his fears, an old monk appeared at the door. His robes were simple, his face weathered by time and the elements, but his eyes held a quiet calm that seemed to pierce through the merchant's turmoil. The monk asked for nothing but a place to rest for the night. The merchant, though preoccupied, could not refuse. He offered the monk a corner of his shop and returned to his counting. Though his mind was now distracted by the presence of this strange, serene figure, hours passed, and the merchant found himself unable to sleep. He tossed and turned, his thoughts racing. Finally, he rose and approached the monk, who sat cross-legged in the corner, his eyes closed in meditation. "How can you sit so peacefully?" the merchant asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "Don't you worry about the future? About what you might lose?" The monk opened his eyes and smiled gently. "What is it that you fear losing?" he asked. The merchant hesitated. "Everything," he said finally. "My wealth, my reputation, my security. If I lose these things, I will have nothing." The monk nodded slowly, as if considering the merchant's words. Then he reached into his robe and pulled out a small, smooth stone. He held it up to the light, turning it so that it caught the glow of the lantern. "This stone," he said, "is all I own. It is simple, unremarkable, and yet it brings me peace. Do you know why?" The merchant shook his head, intrigued despite himself. "Because it is not mine," the monk said. "It belongs to the earth, to the river that shaped it, to the hands that will one day hold it after me. I carry it not because it is valuable, but because it reminds me that nothing is truly mine to keep. Not this stone, not this moment, not even this breath." The merchant frowned, his mind struggling to grasp the monk's words. "But if nothing is mine," he said, "then what is the point of striving, of building, of creating, of living?" The monk smiled again, his gaze steady. "The point," he said, "is not to possess, but to experience, to touch the world lightly, like the wind touches the leaves, without clinging, to live fully, without fear of loss. For it is not the things we hold that define us, but the way we hold them." The merchant sat in silence, the monk's words echoing in his mind. He thought of his shop, his wealth, his endless striving. He thought of the caravan, lost somewhere in the desert, and the fear that had consumed him. And for the first time, he wondered if he had been chasing the wrong thing all along. The next morning, the monk was gone, leaving only the small stone on the floor where he had sat. The merchant picked it up, feeling its smooth surface against his palm. He carried it with him as he opened his shop, as he greeted his customers, as he went about his day. And though the caravan never returned, though his wealth diminished and his shop grew quieter, he found a strange sense of peace settling over him. He no longer clung to what he had, nor feared what he might lose. Instead, he began to see each moment as a gift, each breath as a miracle, each connection as a fleeting, beautiful thread in the tapestry of life. Years later, when the merchant was old and his shop was but a memory, he would sit by the river and watch the water flow. In his hand, he would hold the small stone, now worn smooth by time and touch, and he would smile, not because he had found all the answers, but because he had learned to live with the questions, to hold the world lightly, like the wind holds the leaves, and to let go without regret. For in the end, he realized, it is not what we have that matters, but how we hold it, and how gracefully we let it go.